What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me, my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And guys, we're back. Here we are. It is a new month. It is officially March. We're getting into the swing of things with the friendlies for Paraguay, as we talked before we got on here. Obviously, we're all waiting to see what Gustavo Alfaro will call up in the last friendlies for Paraguay before their basically their pre-World Cup campaign, and obviously the World Cup itself. We got a lot to talk about of what's been going on in the local league and our teams that are being based in there, and also in other international competitions. I think all eyes are looking at the El Decano at Olimpia and how they've been doing. So we'll talk about them in just a second. We got to also talk about what's been going on in regards to other clubs in international competitions. We had obviously Libertadores occur, more negative than positive, and but a bit more positive than negative in the Sudamericana. So we'll talk about that as well. We'll also talk about what our players abroad have been doing. Some of them have been shining super well in England and France and other places as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and of course, we got to talk about what's been going on in terms of new future players for the Paraguay national team, as we got the news of one player that is officially Paraguayan in Gaston Olveira. Um, you know, big, I think something that has been talked about for quite some time and now is officially done. But yeah, let's go straight to Paraguay first, to Fede. It took a little break for a while, but how's things over there in Paraguay as they enter now a new month in March? Is about to be fall soon over there.
It doesn't feel that way yet. Hi, Roberto. Hi, Rob. Hi, everyone listening to Guarani Vision. Great to be back for a new episode. We got definitely a lot of things to catch up, and obviously hit that like button on YouTube. Follow us everywhere. We're on YouTube, on podcasts, and we're definitely also on TikTok, where you can find us on our new account. We're having a lot of movement there. As for Paraguayan football, guys, so far it's pretty much been Olympia semester. I don't know. The first 2 months of competition have passed, and you look at Olympia, looking at everyone from above, right? Unbeaten, they also qualified to the group stage of Conmebol Sudamericana, so everything has been really going Olympia's way so far. Recoleta also managed to pass Nacional in penalties. That was a huge win for them financially, especially. And, looking at everything that's been going on, I would say these last couple of days, my attention has been on Diego Gomez, guys. I mean, what he's been doing, that fantastic goal that he scored against Nottingham Forest again. He's up to what, almost 10 goals now this season. He's definitely killing it, guys. And, he's catching other teams' attentions. Apparently, I'm starting to hear those transfer rumors already. I'm hearing stuff about Omar Alderete also. Our Guarani Premier League boys have been killing it this season, really, and I'm really happy about that situation. As for the local league, we also have our second coach that resigned. We have Lucas Barrios out of Sportivo Luqueño. His spot has been taken over by Pedro Sarabia, who coached Nacional last year. He did a really good job on that club. We'll see how he does with Sportivo Luqueño, a team that's always under pressure, especially if they're going to fight for relegation, as it looks like as of right now. And out of other things, guys, I wanted to throw out there, probably one of the announcements that went really under the radar. I heard the FA president, Robert Harrison, mention that they want to host the Libertadores final 2027. They're going to get the Defensores and Chaco ready to see if Conmebol gives them the possibility to host the Libertadores final 2027. This is something that Ralph hinted a couple weeks ago. Look out, Paraguay's been doing big events, and apparently we're already on our way to the next one, or at least to try to get a huge new event, and that would be the final of the Libertadores in 2027. Fingers crossed, it would be a tremendous game to have here in Paraguay, as the Libertadores is also getting underway. We have the Sudamericana with Olimpia, with Recoleta going through. So we're definitely happy about these teams. And now, as we're heading into the draw to see who they're going to eventually face, also, we got a whole bunch of things to talk about today, Roberto.
Absolutely, and also going back to, Paraguayans, we got to shout out Lanús, who won the Recopa Sudamericana, beating Flamengo at the Maracanã, and won Jose Cañale getting the equalizing goal, which ended up being one of the goals to help Lanús win a title. Obviously, there had been some calls for him to the national team as well, Ralph. So, on top of other players that have been performing abroad, Obviously we even saw the performances of, Damian Bobadilla playing well, Ramon Sosa scoring, as we can see, obviously players that are really trying to make a last case Adam Barreiro, of course, him scoring twice for Boca on his debut. We mentioned it last week, but we weren't here. But yeah, so many things going on. The return of Ruben Lescano to Olimpia, and of course, like you said, just everything that has been focused on. But I guess we will start on Olimpia on that one, Ralph. But first, yeah, I mean, what do you make of, I guess, the last, I would say, 2 weeks of what you've been seeing in Paraguayan football overall?
Yeah, I mean, a lot going on. I think just picking up from Fede's last point, Paraguay, of course, hosted just the U20s women's tournament, which unfortunately Paraguay did not qualify through, which was a bit of a disappointment when the way they'd set it up they just needed the result against Ecuador, who had already qualified, and they lost very heavily. So that was a bit disappointing. But just talking about the hosting, they hosted that. They're hosting now the U20s Libertadores, the men's, which is starting tomorrow, I think, like coming up right now. So Paraguay's turned itself into this hub of being a place where you can have these tournaments, you can have these big showpiece games like the Sudamericana final they've done. So that's why they're building up to the Libertadores, which is very cool. And just before we switch to Olimpia, the other thing that's going on in the background is in Upane and the CADE in the high performance center. They've nearly finished the hotel. I mean, they're building all these new things. They're redoing the pitch because they want to get the same grass that they're going to use in San Francisco. They're getting like all the new hotels, new locker rooms, like everything is a lot of investment is being put in at the moment, and it's because they've realized, right, we're on a high. Let's capitalize while things are going well. So it's an exciting time, and what the authorities are doing, which is, we haven't always talked about this here, that they're doing the right thing, but what they're doing is they're putting everything in place. And so now it's going to be up to the players to kind of respond. And we're seeing some of them respond in Europe, like you were just talking about some of these performances. And we're getting excited that they can do it in the US come next year. I was going to say, come in a few months that they're going to be playing over there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very exciting to see, and hopefully it also just it gives more interest more to the country that other sporting events could be done, especially like I said, with the World Cup coming up in 4 years' time over there. I think it's also going to be very cool to see what other things they can do as well. But yeah, let's talk about what's been going on in the local league, obviously, and then of course one of our teams that we do have to mention is Olimpia, because Olimpia seems to be the talk of the town, Fede, because of what they've been doing. Well, first of all, winning the Super Classico over there. We didn't mention it last time, but obviously them beating Cerro Porteño at La Nueva Olla with another goal from Richard Ortiz. Again, it seems like he's always loves to have a knack of scoring against Cerro Porteño. He helped them with a victory there. Then, of course, them beating Libertad, and of course, then beating Ameliano. Yeah, so it's three in a row. They're currently top of the Apertura with 20 points, the only team not to lose a single game so far in the local league, and obviously everything else that's been going on from an international level as well, because they're also in the Sudamericana. They took on Trinidense 1-0, and they obviously they beat them with a goal from Luen Lescano, a player that had left Luminense to go to Olimpia. So it feels like Olimpia have been the talk of the town over there, like I said, while we were gone, and it feels as if though that this team with Vitamina Sanchez is really trying to work out well. And I think it even proved a lot of doubters wrong. I think there were a lot of people that were not that high on Olimpia in terms of what they were going to do in this Apertura, but it seems as if though they're turning the critics around, and that they're actually demonstrating that they are willing to compete on both fronts. Well, now both fronts with them in the Sudamericana, beating Trinidad. So that's obviously going to help them financially of them being into the group stage of the tournaments, and yeah, obviously what else they can do in the Apertura.
Yeah, I would like to even, mix up things, between Sudamericana and the Apertura, because it kind of ended up building the situation up to this game against Trinidense. They had already played each other in the Apertura. It was a really hard game for Olimpia. Trinidense had their opportunities. They were missing Sarsa, who in that game in the Apertura was probably the player that drove them crazy. Even though in this particular game in the Sudamericana, you've seen other players stand out in Trinidense, but for Olimpia, it's pretty much maintaining that clean sheet, right? I mean, it's getting Gaston Olveira to do his thing again, get back in form, and he's been really the best player, I would say, in these last couple of games, guys, and so important in this game specifically against Sportivo Trinidense to go through to the group stage. I mean, he had so many saves, so many important saves. A couple of them were looked impossible, I would even say, but he's always been that goalkeeper, that salvation, or that player that Olimpia sometimes need, or in a big team you need a goalkeeper like that, right? Just to even build a good team, I would say. And I think they have that again, like they didn't have last year. Unfortunately, Gaston Olveira, the injuries kind of kept him away from the team, but we're seeing this 2026. Olveira apparently has something in his mind, and he has a goal, guys, and apparently it's to play the World Cup. And he's definitely showing his level. He's definitely showing his stuff. He's catching people's attention, and people are talking about him. He's very loved by the fans here, and I like what we're seeing, from this Olimpia team overall. Even though I would say they just keep on winning, they have the winning mentality, and they're going all out in every game. And I think that's also one of the keys, that you're seeing players really reacting to what the coach wants. You're seeing the coach reading the games correctly, and he's putting the best players out there. I mean, Ruben Lescano just got here, and he was already playing both games, because he really was the difference in both matches. I mean, in this game, he even scored the winning goal. So props to Olimpia for picking up this player in the transfer market, which was a player that a lot of teams probably wanted, like Libertad, Cerro Porteño, but he ended up picking Olimpia. And Olimpia, the way that they play, they could really use a player like Ruben Lescano, because they didn't really have a creative player in that midfield, and he is very good one-on-one, and he also can score, and he wants to show his thing. He wants to show his stuff in a tournament like the Sudamericana, to even catch the national team's coach attention. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this team evolve, keep on growing. We talked about the difficulties they had in defense. I think right now that's not a problem in this team. And I'm thinking, if they can stay healthy, if they can now maintain this base of players that we saw against Sportivo Trinidense, look out for Olimpia, guys, because the fans are by their side. The coach is apparently, having everybody on his side also. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Vitamina Sanchez and his Olimpia in this 2026, Ralph.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting start in that so they're totally unbeaten. They drew 0-0 with Rubio New is probably their worst result, but they got the red card very early on. They drew with Dos de Mayo, but away, which we've talked about is a very difficult place to go. They've won every other game, but they've won every game by one goal. They've only been leading by 2 goals in the very first match against Guarani, which they scored the second goal in like the 91st minute, and then Guarani pulled one back. So every game has been very close. It's been You've needed Olveira, the goalkeeper, in different moments to show his stuff. So they're not like a Manchester City or a Barcelona under Pep that was just, steamrolling everybody. But they're a classic Olympia team in that they're being very like winning mentality, getting the results done. They've now won 5 games in a row, 1-0. But in those 5 games, you didn't feel they weren't going to win. Even the Clásico with Cerro, you kind of felt this is once Ortiz scored, you're like, uh-oh, this is gonna continue. And yeah, they picked up Ruben Lescano has been a great signing because he's played 2 games and he scored the winner in both matches, as Fede was mentioning. But also like people like Raúl Cáceres, what a clever signing that turned out to be, playing right back. He's like 34, but he has so much experience. And he's been actually in that defense, he's been pretty much like the one mainstay. I mean, he got sent off in the first game, but while he's been available, he's been like a mainstay because it's interesting. Like Gamarra sometimes plays central defense, sometimes he puts him out at left back if he's not playing Coyote Rodriguez, who's also a very good signing he made, right? And Benton Berry seems to fit in really well. but he even played Vargas sometimes in defense. Like he's kind of moved it about a bit in the defense, except for Raul Cáceres and Alvedo, of course, the goalkeeper. But it's working for them. And then yeah, with adding Lescano has just added like extra kind of angle of attack because they had Quintana scoring some goals, they had Alcaraz has scored some goals, Sebastian Ferreira has scored at times. But now they have these, you have between 4 or 5 players that could possibly do something and score. I mean, they're going to be very difficult to beat. I think the big challenge is the fact that they've qualified for Sudamericana because now they're going to have to play lots more games. And so it could be a blessing or it could be kind of like what's the word? It could end up becoming a bit of a hindrance because now he really has to rotate. But so far, I mean, everything is looking very good. And probably Cerro and Libertad are still the two challenges. Nacional's now dropping off, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. So, but still, I mean, the gap's big. There's not many games. So Olympia's really made a great start, and they're the ones, in control of this championship.
Yeah, I was about to say, for them, I'm just looking at the schedule they have. So they got San Lorenzo, which is, one of the worst team in the league at the minute. Then they got Recoleta, who obviously are riding high as well from their qualification, beating Nacional on penalties. And then they finish it off against Sportivo Luqueño before the sort of break. And then obviously the Segunda Vuelta, the second turnaround. So I don't know if Olimpia will have the capability to drop points. I think they will probably go into the international break unbeaten. I think they could still. I think that's. It's not bold to say because I think they've been so good, but I think they're going to finish this sort of last 3 games before the break, um, in a good spot. And I don't know if anyone will be willing to go and contend. I mean, obviously, Cerro Porteño have a more tricky schedule. They got Guarani, they play Trinidense, and then they play Rubio New. And the other team that's right there in that sort of contention part is Nacional. They play Trinidense, Rubio New, and Libertad. So one would think that Olimpia has the easier schedule of the three if we look at it. So it's not a case of not Nacional and Cerro Porteño not screwing up their point and trying to get back. But it's the case of like Olimpia. I don't see them dropping off in any of those 3 games.
Yeah, and they can drop off points either way because they already beat the teams that are gonna be the contenders for the title. They already beat Guarani, they already beat Cerro Porteño, they beat Libertad. So they beat all these teams. They also beat Nacional. So, I mean, that's where you make the real difference, right? And that's why Olimpia is really carrying that first spot. I don't expect them to lose many points from here to the international break, especially because they're healthy guys. I mean, they barely lost any player due to injuries, which is something that everybody's going through. You look at it, most of the teams in first division, and they all have problems right now. They're all starting to have difficulties because the calendar is so tight. Everybody's playing pretty much every 3 days, and we have games midweek all the time. So it's been really hard for the players physically, but not for Olimpia. I think they did a really good preseason, and you can see it in certain players. I mean, what Richard Ortiz is doing this year, guys. I mean, you're seeing Richard Ortiz that's not just the captain and not just having some sort of revenge tour, but he's also physically probably in the best form that I've seen him in these last 2-3 years, I would say. And that speaks very well. That speaks that, Olimpia went into the preseason with the mindset that we can't go through the same thing that we went through last year. And I see that in every game that Olimpia plays, even though they hire really good players, Alfaro, Betanberri, Cáceres, Rubén Lescano. The list is huge of really good players they brought in, and most of them are playing. Some are, having a breakthrough year like Hugo Quintana. I think, the competition is in there. And that's good. I'm sure the coach is very happy with this, that he looks at the bench and he sees a Richard Sanchez, that he sees, a Sebastian Ferreira now waiting for his opportunity because Alcaraz all of a sudden started scoring. He's looking at Alex Franco. Alex Franco, every time he comes on, he's also making a difference in the midfield. So this is looking all good for Olimpia right now. He can rotate players and he can still find a way to win games. So I think, Olimpia fans are feeling really good about their team. And inside that locker room, I think the confidence is totally there. They're finding ways to win games, and that's the important thing. Eventually, they'll try to not suffer as much as they have in certain games. That's something that the coach has been talking about, trying to score a bit more, trying to score a couple of more. But you're gonna get that eventually from Sebastian Ferreira. You're gonna get that from Lescano. Eventually, you're gonna have Ivan Leguizamón also scoring a couple of goals. So I think this team is on their way to getting this championship, guys. As of right now, I don't see anybody else up to the level and the way that Olimpia is playing. Cerro Nacional, they're very far from the confidence and from what they're showing in their games, especially Nacional, guys. Nacional had the hot start, but all of a sudden they've gone cold and they can't win lately.
Ralph, do we have our champion already?
It's early days. It's very early days, but you can't. I mean, Cerro have just been going through the motions. They've won some games, but you can't really see them clawing back. I think it's 6 points right now. To Fede's point, Nacional's dropping off. So the team that you would always look out for is Libertad, managed by Chiqui Arce. They just did that 7-0 win, or against San Lorenzo. That was a real statement win with a lot of the new signings. Um, but still, they're going to have to make up so much ground. I mean, you don't want to call it 8 games into the season, but at the moment, I mean, really, Olympia's in the driving seat. I think it would take something special from Libertad. Because I think Cerro they're going to get distracted with the Libertadores. Libertad are always able to manage better the two competitions. So is having a look at if Libertad start doing something based on this win we've just seen and the new signings. And when Chiqui Arce, sometimes his teams don't do as well when he doesn't have what he wants, and when he gets what he wants, then they just start racking up wins. So maybe Libertad could make a difference, but Olympia's in the driving seat. They'd be my favorite right now.
They've been looking so good. They've been actually looking good, and it's going to be hard for anyone to try to get to them. Obviously, we got to mention what's been going on in the Sudamericana. As we mentioned, Olimpia are the team that are going to be in the Copa Sudamericana after beating Trinidense. Recoleta, of course, like I said, beating Nacional on penalties, which I think is a huge thing for them, especially given the resources and, of course, the comparison when it comes to Nacional. So happy for them, and of course, Olimpia being in that. But unfortunately, not happy that we'll have two less Paraguayan teams in the Libertadores. Guarani could not do it against Juventud de las Piedras after losing to them at home 2-1, and of course, Dos de Mayo losing on penalties to Sporting Cristal over there in Peru. So some joy and some delight, Fede, on our Paraguayan teams in the international stage. I mean, obviously we'll have four in total. We'll have two in the Libertadores, and then with the Libertad in Cerro Porteño, and then two obviously in the Sudamericana with Olimpia and Recoleta. But you were kind of hoping for some more representation, but unfortunately it was not meant to be.
Yeah, we thought really one of the two at least was going to make it, right? Either Dos de Mayo or Guarani. We had our money more on Guarani because of what they did last year, and they looked kind of like a better team. But really, against this Juventud Las Piedras, they didn't show their best stuff, and offensively, the goals just didn't come. And when it was a fight in the mud, the Uruguayans felt a lot more comfortable in that situation on the physical game, and they really had the series more for them than what I need with the better opportunities, right? I thought even in Uruguay they could have gotten that goal and gotten that better result to come to Asunción and finish the job, but they didn't do it. They didn't do it, and when they played in Defensores del Chaco, they had a red card early. I think that's something that went totally against their plan and their strategy, but the coach wasn't able to get the right pieces together, I would even say, in that second half. And you look at certain players and they weren't available also, and what I need didn't hire that much during the preseason, so they really needed everybody to get the job done. And they didn't have all their best players. I wanna think that was the excuse, because they didn't end up firing Bernay. They're going to stick with him the rest of the year. Apparently, as of right now, at least they're going to keep on going with him. I had Guarani as one of the strongest teams in this Apertura, but so far they're really having a lot of trouble, and it's even looking And I'm hearing it from a lot of their fans also. We didn't hire as much as Olimpia did. We didn't hire as much as Cerro Porteño did. So it doesn't look like they're up for the competition. It looks like for them, it's a year of transition. It's a year to build new players and to put in young players, probably even on that team. I think that's why they're sticking with Bernay, who has also always been a good coach, promoting players. But for the Libertadores, they didn't have enough. And I'm actually kind of happy that they didn't make it through, because you look at the way they played and they don't have enough for the group stage. So the best thing they could do right now is just focus on the local league and try to catch up, because this calendar and playing both competition has been really bad for some of these teams. Even those de Mayo, they barely won while they were totally distracted on the Sudamericana adventure.
Yeah, I think for Guarani, particularly it was a very disappointing way to go out. But to Fede's point, maybe it's going to save them from more kind of drama, I suppose, in the group stages. They're in a situation where, of course, they're rebuilding their stadium. So maybe one of the reasons they couldn't bring many people in is because, the money is going elsewhere. They get help from Commonwealth for the building of the stadium, but it's maybe it wasn't a time to be investing too much in players. I'm guessing that's what the kind of president and people would be saying. But it does mean that they they've been so close in the last 3 or 4 seasons. They've been up there fighting. So there was a maybe a moment they could have tried to kick on and made some big signings, or got in the mix with, when some of these players. You never talk about Guarani when you're talking about Ruben Lescano or Pulpito Duarte or Alan Benitez. These guys that just came back. Guarani are not even expected to be in the conversation, and so maybe it was a time to make a statement. But it does seem it's more this transition phase, get the stadium completed, get through the league without having to stretch ourselves in terms of having to pay huge salaries, which is a shame, I think, for the fans, because they were getting close to success and they didn't quite get it, and now they're gonna have to wait another cycle, it seems. And then for Dos de Mayo, I mean, that was an amazing game, right? In up there in Lima, and it was very exciting. I mean, they brought so much to this competition just in the knockout stages. They just couldn't do it. They even in the penalty shootout, right? There was a point they were leading. They were leading that penalty shootout, and you were like, "Whoa, this is gonna happen." And then they end up when they missed their penalty, it sort of turned the momentum a bit, and out they went. But still, I thought it was an incredible like ride they had in those two ties, and so much seemed to happen in those. It was only 4 games, right? But so much seemed to happen. That's definitely, I'm sure that's like whetted the appetite to say we should do this. We should be doing this again, and to continue with some of the investment and some of the kind of building they've been doing up there in Pedro Juan Caballero. So I don't think it's the last we'll see of Dos de Mayo in big international competition.
Yeah, totally. I think that they both have a way to make revenge basically on what they're gonna do. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they can help go back to that situation come next year. We got to talk about what's been going on with our players abroad, because obviously we had so much going on over the last 2 weeks that we didn't discuss. Obviously, we've had some transfers, like we mentioned, Ruben Lescano going to Olimpia. That was a big move as well. Rodney Redes going to Liga de Quito, one of another national team player. Matias Galarza going to Atlanta United. He's going to be teaming up with Miguel Almiron over there in an Atlanta side that really need to get some wins. They haven't been really looking hot to start the season. Obviously, we had Alexis Duarte join Libertad. Unfortunately, his time there did not work well, because he obviously had a big injury in his first game. Matias Rojas joining them as well. There's just been so much going on, but I think the one that we have to start off is what our players are doing currently in terms of their form. I think we got to start with, firstly, Diego Gomez, who currently is with 10 goals in all competitions. He just scored again the other day, playing for Brighton, Albion, against Nottingham Forest, and of course against Brentford. So that's 2 games in a row that he scored. He's already on 10 goals this season. I think he's one behind Danny Welbeck for most goals in the entire competition, but still for him as a midfielder, who's been playing more advanced anyway, Ralph, I think this is really good form to see. And, obviously it hasn't been without the interest you would say of all of him doing this. And of course, being that it is Brighton and that usually if you are a young star performing well, you're going to have some interested suitors. And yeah, it seems like some of the biggest clubs in the Premier League will try to get to him next season after the World Cup if he does go. But it's on a personal level, it's good for Diego, and of course, it's good for the national team heading into the friendlies, of course, coming up later this month, and of course, the World Cup as well.
Yeah, I think what's really good for him is he got his place in the team. And then people came back from injury, like Mitoma is one example, because at one point you were thinking, are they going to try and play him a bit like Inter Miami did of like wide, almost wide left, even though he's right-footed, but having like press all the time. And then it was like, oh no, is he going to play a bit more almost like a defensive role with I think with Baleba he was playing right, and then eventually like he's found this place on the right, and it's using what he does in terms of being able to press high because as well he's just so good at it. He's so good at kind of organizing, and then it's also like giving him he has license to be able to get forward and get into the box, and the goal he scores. Is it the Forest one? The one,
Yeah.
the volley, right? Like the half volley. Wow, that was such
Yeah, it was
incredible.
Forrest. Yeah, it was Forrest.
Yeah. So like he's found that role in the team, whereas that was always gonna be the difficult thing with Diego Gomez. Like he's so good, he can play in so many different positions, but that can sometimes be a curse, right? Because then you're always getting moved around and used, and it's like he's solidified, found that role, and he's doing it so well. And yeah, I think that people are talking about other clubs. I mean, he has an agent that is also Alderete's agent and Diego Leon's agent. That is always going to try and move players because he'll always talk it up to the press. So it's hard to try and find the truth in everything. But I wouldn't be surprised that bigger teams that are playing European football would think Diego Gomez might not be my starting midfielder, but if I'm going to play a lot of competitions, this is exactly the kind of person I would want in my
You
team.
want him at Arsenal, Ralph. Don't admit it. You want him there.
Well, I mean, I love it. We need a Paraguayan at Arsenal, right?
Yeah, of course.
But also my second role as Arsenal Paraguay supporters club. But honestly, like I don't think he fits quite as well. I think he fits better in a Liverpool or City in terms of the way they're pressing and the way they like to play. I mean, he's very much a pet player. He's a real system player, isn't he? Because he's so good at taking the information on board and just playing those different roles. So yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be surprised. I think the summer, I think the World Cup's going to be a big moment as well, right? To see that at the very top level. But yeah, performing really well. And I didn't expect him to score 10 goals. I mean, especially because I thought they were going to play him a bit more defensively at first. So scoring 10 goals, I mean, that's a huge bonus for Brighton as well. I don't know if they really expected him to be that player, but he has been, and it's going so well for him. And we've always said it on this show, right? Every challenge that Diego Gomez has faced in his career, he's taken it up another level, and he's like, okay, ticked off that box, and he's going for more. So we still haven't found his ceiling, which is very exciting.
Yeah, and Fede, even if you take out like the goals he scored in the EFL Cup, I mean, he scored one game, he scored 4 goals in one game. Even if you take all of that, I mean, he's still beating everyone by a huge margin. The next guy after Diego Gomez is Yassin Ari, who is a center midfielder as well, but he has 4 in all competitions, and 3 in the Premier League, so 2 less than Diego. But again, I think it's just a demonstration of, like Ralph said, I think he said it right perfectly there, is like every challenge that he gets, he just goes and surpasses. And you have to remember, he's barely over a year into his time in the Premier League. Usually people take time to get it. There's been cases of several players, even some good ones. I mean, we look at Almiron, for example. It took him a while for him to actually get used to it. And he was much older. But for Diego to get used to it here in Brighton, and again, I think that is certainly credit to Hertzler and just the way that, yeah, finally he gets some Paraguayans that actually appreciate him for once. But even if it's not the best team, like, I don't know if they're going to qualify for any European competition next year, just because it feels like a bridge too far and there's other teams up them. I mean, we'll see. But, at least you can say that even if it's been a disappointing season for, for a Brighton fan and, anyone that follows them on a personal level, I think they need to recognize that Diego has been one of their shining spots on the team. And I think that is good for them. And, I think unfortunately for a lot of these teams that have shining stars and, obviously need to make money to obviously take off the loss of them not making for Europe or whatever, that is to make money and to make as much money as they can. And so they're trying to cash out on their latest gem. And I think that latest gem is Diego Gomez.
He's been so consistent, guys, this whole season, and I think that probably puts him as one of the favorite players in this team from the fans and for us from here in Paraguay. It's also been something to follow because we've always had that problem, just keep on playing and be a starter and maintain your spot. And we went through that situation with a lot of Paraguayans and in big leagues, and Diego's just totally different in that sense. I mean, you see it from the work ethic, you see it from the way coaches talk about him on a day-to-day basis. The mentality is totally there for him to become that player that we think he can be, a star in a big team, and hopefully he's really close to that next step because so far, in Inter Miami, he was under the shadow of Lionel Messi. Maybe in Libertad, he had Julio Enciso also breaking through. Now in Brighton, he didn't come as a star, but I don't know. I'm looking at his numbers this year. I'm looking at his consistency in the team, and I'm thinking he's probably one of the best players in this whole season in Brighton. They might even give him an award at the end of the season because of that situation. He's one of the best players in this team, and his big award could be a transfer. And I'm looking forward to that because obviously if he's coached by Pep Guardiola, if he's coached by one of the best coaches in the world in any of these teams, I mean, he could just take it up a notch even more. And I'm really looking forward to that situation because just as Ralph mentioned, I mean, he can play everywhere pretty much in the midfield, and he's even having numbers as a forward. We can compare him with other players that play closer to the box and they don't score as much as Diego has scored this season. So it's really looking bright for him right now, and it's even looking better for his future. Hopefully, he heads this way into the World Cup. And I don't know, Alfaro might be even thinking, where am I going to use him? Am I going to use him in the midfield next to Andres Cubas, or am I going to have to free him up and use him more as an attacking player? I think Alfaro's also having to think about this situation because as we're heading into the World Cup, Diego Gomez is definitely one of the top players in Paraguay. And I think even you're going to have to start building the team around the best players also.
I'm about to say, like, can you imagine Diego Gomez? It's crazy when you think about it. Like, because if you have Diego Gomez and Julio Enciso together in that front three, that takes out someone like Sanabria, maybe an Almiron. You're gonna have to change the way it looks. I mean, yeah, it's interesting because as much as a good player he is, he's also a strange one in the sense of like, you can play him anywhere. I think I even saw a quote that he can play like 10 positions besides goalkeeper. But but that's it, Ralph. That's the thing. Like, where do you play a player like him? And ultimately, because of what he is able to do, like, I like to use the term the Swiss Army knife, but like what he can contribute is obviously useful for one, for any team that gets him, and two, any team that is able to utilize him in the best way. And if Paraguay are going to do that at the World Cup, it has to be in a situation where, you know, he needs to he needs to be like sort of the metronome and be able to build that team around him.
Yeah, or well, really though, you can build the team around someone else and then you can fit Diego where he will like help that person. So in the case of Paraguay, probably yeah, what they're missing most are goals, right? That's always been the main issue is how do you find goals? And so what you want by having like Gomez and Almiron, who are both players that can score goals, but really can do a lot of defensive work, what you're doing is you're giving the kind of freedom to Julio Enciso. So it's kind of it's a weird way, right? But basically you build the team more around Enciso, but you give Gomez that position where he can cover some of the ground that Enciso's not going to do from his position. And so I mean I think I'm guessing we'll end up seeing him in a similar position. I suppose the issue they have right now is they've used Almiron a lot, where Gomez is now playing in Brighton. So is do you do you like put Gomez there to kind of, what's the word, like highlight what he's doing, or do you keep Almiron there because it's kind of been working and keep Gomez, on the maybe over to the left or just behind Enciso? So I mean, but it's a good problem to have essentially for Alfaro because he doesn't have like it's not like an Andres Cubas. Like Cubas, you need Cubas where he plays, and you can't really replace him because we haven't found a player that plays as well as him in that position. But you also can't put Cubas somewhere else. Like he's not gonna be as good there. Whereas with Diego Gomez, like let's fit him into the piece of the jigsaw we need him, and I guess we'll start seeing it very soon in like 2 weeks, hopefully, or just over 3 weeks in those games against Greece and Morocco.
Yeah, and of course you got to talk about another player that's been going on a good form, Omar Lerete. He's still been one of their better players at Sunderland, and maybe that could be a guy as well, Fed, that could move on in the summer. I think I even saw that rumor of like him going to a bigger team, depending on what happens with Sunderland. They're still not out of the woods in terms of what their future will be, either in Europe or maybe even in what's it called, out of relegation. So we got to see what happens there. But let's close out on one more guy that's been doing well, and it's Julio Enciso. What he's been doing over there in France at Strasbourg. He's been performing very well. He scored a goal the other day in their win against Reims to go to the semifinals of the Coupe de France. So they're 2 wins away from a domestic trophy, which for a club like Strasbourg, having to deal with obviously the big dogs like Lyon, like Marseille, and all those guys. Obviously, none of them are actually in that. So it's Strasbourg, Nice in the semifinal, and Lens Toulouse in the other one. So, and of course they're still competing well in Liga. I think they're eighth or something. They're just a couple points from the last spot in the Conference League, which also they are in. They will be playing against Rijeka of Croatia this coming week in the knockout phase. So. And Ciso has got and he's been performing well as well. But Ralph, I'll go to you on this one. Julio's been really been doing well on that end in terms of his development in France. I mean, I think it was gonna be expected for him to do well. I think there was always doubts about what could happen to him because we've seen this before that maybe he gets injured or something, but he's been really demonstrating. He's got 9 goals in all competitions. So, and the only guy that's really above him is Panicelli, the Argentine striker, who they've been having a good partnership as well. But yeah, it's been looking good for Enciso in terms of what's it called, of what he's been doing in France, and he's still in pole position, I guess, to go for a title run and to go somewhere if it's domestic or in Europe.
Yeah, I think it's been really good for him to get this many minutes without injury. So this is now like his record in Europe in terms of minutes played. And so it was so important, I think, after having those injuries and never really like he'd get up a little run and do well in patches and then it would drop off. Like, what coaches needed to see was, but is he able to play in European football for a whole season? Because otherwise, if he's always going to be injured, it's not going to work out. So that part was really important. And then obviously it's almost like naturally comes with it. The more he plays, the more he'll end up scoring because he's Julio Enciso, and that's kind of what he does. Well, what he's added to his game this year is what's been really good is scoring goals inside the box. I think in the Premier League, like he really scored inside the box because he was always trying, the crazy shots from outside the area, and lots of them went in, or well, a handful went in. But again, it was that consistency of like, but I need a player that can really be doing this all the time, and you're not able to score, a goal of the season every week. So he's getting all of that. Of course, we're seeing some of the old, well, not the old Julians, some of the character because you talked about he scored, but and his partnership, but I mean they were arguing over the penalty, right? And that was kind of classic in Cesar that he is a very strong character and he wanted the penalty. He wanted the penalty because he'd been like 4 or 5 games without a goal, I think. So and he'd actually scored, I think, in the last cup game also a penalty. And so I think it was a bit like, hey, come on, I need a break here. It's my turn now. And of course, he steps up and scores. That's the other thing. He has a big character, but he delivers. I still remember an interview when he was very young at Libertad, and they got a last-minute penalty against Olimpia, and Taquara could have taken it, right? And he said, "No, I'm taking it." And after when they interviewed him and they said, did you feel the pressure? It was like, no. I know how good I am. I can score. And this is when he's like 17 or something. So, I mean, fast forward to now, that confidence has not disappeared. And so you can see, like that's the Julio Enciso. I think that apart from, so there's all the consistency I'm talking about in the minutes, but there's the character and there's the kind of not, he's not eccentric, but is it's the passion, I suppose, that he also has too. Which is all of that combined makes him the player he is. But so far, I mean, this is a really good season, and it's turned out to be just the move he needed, which is very good because when he got signed for Chelsea, it was kind of like, I don't know, this is not going to work if it didn't work at Brighton, and Ipswich, it was okay, but the going to Strasbourg has just been the perfect move for him.
I was about to say, going on to that Fed, is he ready for that jump, or do you feel like, we still need to wait and see what he can do? Firstly at the World Cup, and then obviously, hey, maybe Strasbourg wins something and they play in other competitions. Who knows?
Yeah, I see players in Chelsea that don't have enough level and are not up there with Julio's status, I would even say. I mean, he's been regular starter. He's shown that he's fit. If anybody had doubts about, his body and the injuries that he went through, he's really showing that he's up for any challenge. And he's been a regular now in the French league, making a difference, always on the starting team. For me, it's just finish the season playing and scoring. And if you can get a title in there, even better, right? Because that would make him even a legend, I would say, in Strasbourg. So, we saw him get mad the other day because he wanted to kick that first penalty. It's just part of his character. He's gonna go through that in probably all the teams that he plays because he's not gonna get away from that. Even though he looks way more mature now, you're seeing him look more and more as a European player in the sense that, he's not just trying to fake out everybody and trying to go through everyone. Now he's trying to pass the ball more, trying to be more practical, do what the coach tells you. But, when he's close to the box, he knows he can make the difference. And that's the player that we want to see. That Julio that's hungry for competition, that Julio that's getting ready for the World Cup. And so far, it's looked really well. Just when you think, okay, he's taking a couple of steps back. Is he going to be able to get on the radar of those big teams again? I think he's having that kind of season. And with the World Cup coming soon, it could be that kind of tournament that Julio and even Diego Gomez need for that big signing, guys. And hopefully it does go their way also in the World Cup because I want to see at least a couple of Paraguayans in the Champions League. I love watching the Champions League, but it's been a couple of years, several years that we haven't had a Paraguayan, in the spotlight. And I think Julio, Diego Gomez are up there. They're really close to a big team. Alderete is another one. He's been killing it, guys. He's been playing through injuries even during the season. So it's been really good to see these three guys evolve and have so far a really good season, all three of them.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll have to wait and see what other form can happen this weekend. Obviously, what's going on and other competitions as well. And obviously waiting for that list that Alfaro will surely announce very, very soon. And we'll be here to talk about it as we always do here on Guarani Vision as we close out another great episode. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.